need to. And I'm very excited about our guest this morning. So if we've got anyone tuning in from any interesting places, then please give us a little shout out. It's always interesting to know where the audience is from. Mahesh is actually in New Zealand himself, so it might be some fellow Kiwis from down that way. But I think we'll just get started. So hello, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Nell. I'm part of the Blackbird team. I joined about 4 months ago now as people lead, and I'm very honoured today to have Mahesh joining us for Giants Weekly. Mahesh has held multiple executive roles in some of Australia's most iconic startups. He was an early employee at Canva, helping grow the team to 200 plus people. He helped Airtasker become profitable and go global, and more recently was COO at Simply Wall Street. Mahesh now plays an active role in consulting and advising many startups in Australia and New Zealand as a startup investor and mentor. Today, Mahesh is here to discuss setting up the right fit leadership teams, what to consider, how to avoid the ego and hype, and moving past some of the common myths in this space. We'll be launching straight into the presentation, so please send any questions you have into the Zoom Q&A. And we will leave about 10 minutes at the end for Mahesh to answer these. So straight into it, very much looking forward to this, Mahesh, if you want to kick things off.
Sure, thanks, Mel. Congrats again on the new gig.
Thank you.
Very important role that you play at one of the top venture capital firms in Australia and New Zealand. So really excited about doing this. Please let me know if there's anything wrong with the visual now. Otherwise, I'll carry on. So the opportunity I have today is to talk you through, in my opinion, how to set up and what to consider when you're organizing leadership teams, and specifically in startup land and scale-up land. I think the word right fit is quite important because you really can't afford to have too much waste in the decisions you make. So I'll go through a little bit of an intro. I'll talk you through some foundations that I believe are important, some first principles, right fit priorities, leadership's job, measuring leadership, board leadership team alignment, and some key takeaways. A good place to start, I thought, and very startup-y, is I thought I'd get the takeaways out of the way right at the beginning, and then we can conclude on the takeaways as well. So as I go through the presentation, a few things I'd like you to think about. Recognize the stage of the organization, the notion of think slow, act fast, and a very good way of making sure you think slow is writing stuff down, hiring slow, measuring the performance of a leadership team, board leadership team alignment, what exactly is the CEO's job, and the notion that the high performance culture starts from the top. So very quick intro to myself. From a very young age, I was a quality and management geek. My dad was a quality engineer, so he had books like Kaizen lying around, and I thought it was a fascinating samurai story. Lo and behold, it was just a lot of geeky talk about quality engineering. Had the chance to hear a lot of company stories through professional services. Got a lot more insight into how the dots were connected through my MBA and leadership roles. Was a startup CEO, and then, as Nell mentioned, had a really wonderful opportunity in working extremely closely with some of Australia's foremost startup CEOs, and I've had the pleasure of having D&Ms with many others. So that's been really wonderful learning for me. So I thought a good place to start would be, actually, let's define what the topic is. And what I mean by right fit, and I literally looked this up on Google, is that it meets the required standard. It does not exceed nor fail to hit the required standard. So when we're setting these leadership teams up, that it hits the nail on the head and doesn't do too much or too little. Leadership is the art of motivating a group of people to act towards achieving a common goal. Leadership team, the team that does the above leadership stuff. The purpose of a company, and this is really important to me, and this wasn't part of the definition. I think this is really important, that every leadership team, every board, every employee really holds on to and understands. And I think it's something that we constantly forget especially in startups where we scale so fast, is that the primary goal of a company or an organization is to create value. And so all decisions, hiring decisions, marketing decisions, firing decisions, everything should be based on, hey, is this creating more value to the end customer through employees and partnering with other stakeholders? And I think holding on to that hard and holding on to that prism really hard when you're making decisions, that every decision is about creating value and working towards a mission makes life a lot easier. So I wanted to start off with some first principles. There's this guy called Ashwathan Damodaran. He's called the Dean of Valuation. And if you haven't heard of him and you haven't followed him or you haven't watched his YouTube clips, please do. It may not be as exciting as what's that new Netflix show called? Oh, I can't remember that Brentridge or something, but it may not be as exciting as that show. However, he takes you through immaculate, incredible valuations of companies, how companies grow, etc. One of the things he presents is really understanding the stage of a company, right? So being able to acknowledge that if you're a child, if you're an early teen, if you're a teen, if you're in your youth and your adulthood, and then you mature on and towards the lag end of things, you have different priorities and you have to run differently. You have to organize your finances differently. You have to think differently. Your risk profile is different. So really understanding that each company is different and at different stages, and it requires different leadership styles, etc. I think that's really important. So let's break that down a little bit. So I've broken it down into seven areas, and I'll talk through this. There's a lot going on in this slide, and I understand this will be on YouTube, so hopefully it'll be even more comfortable watching this later on. Right at the beginning of a startup, the growth priority is product innovation. Then as you grow, you really need to nail the product market fit. And then you want to experiment in marketing. You put the afterburners on in marketing and sales. Then marketing innovation becomes more powerful than product innovation. And then product innovation, you try product innovation, but it's really hard. So you start getting to M&A. And then as the S-curve really goes down, you really need to invest in M&A. The leadership focus right at the beginning is purely end user, right? Like you have to build something that that gets product market fit. Very quickly after that, the team starts to form and you start to invest more into the team. Somewhere around the third stage, your team actually, in my opinion, becomes greater than and more important than the end user, because your focus as a leadership team, as a CEO, shifts from making the product to making the product that makes the product. And what I mean by that, the machine that makes the machine, as Elon Musk talks about, which is the company. So the people in your company, how you set up systems, structure, all of that becomes really important. And a CEO and a leadership team and the skill set it actually has to change. A little bit on hiring. And again, a lot of leadership teams, in my opinion, don't prioritize and don't set up talent acquisition teams and don't invest into talent acquisition teams enough. It is the single most costly thing you do in your business is hiring. So having very data-oriented, rigorous, slow hiring processes that make sure that right at the beginning, you can't afford any false positives. And only towards the middle, as you kick in high growth, you switch from going from not being able to have false positive to really can't have false negatives, because you can't hold on to things. A leadership team should be having really tight cost management early on. Then you start to be a lot more fluid towards the lag end. Again, a lot of tight cost management, low levels of autonomy early on, because you just need to get stuff done. But as the product grows, your level of autonomy starts to really loosen up, and you need to decentralize. You need more system structures. And I just want to call this out. I'm a big fan of guidelines are greater than policies. So making sure that people have guidelines and fluidity, therefore, to operate in. One thing that's really important to me, I think, in regards to talking about this leadership, in regards to leadership teams, is right at the beginning, you start off as co-founders. Then as the team grows, you need to, in my opinion, bring on board a couple of generalists to make sure, with the co-founders, to make sure that big pieces of your business are taken care of. People who you trust, people who are commercial, people who get stuff done. I have called out that you probably need an engineering leader quite early on, mainly because engineering is your largest team for most software tech companies, and it's the highest level of investment. Then as it grows, you need to start forming a leadership team, which are leaders in their craft. So a head of design, a head of product management, etc. Right? And this carries on for a long time. And you can also see the CEO's role and his association or her association with this team starts to change. Lastly, I want to call out the risk tolerance for the leadership team. It's obviously quite high in a startup early on, but it really starts to go mid and low unless you are able to invest through M&A into other businesses. So what does the leadership team have to get right? And I've seen this time and time again. It is incredible how much you don't realize that communication and context is so much of what a leadership team is supposed to do. It is literally, hey, this is our plan. This is our strategy. This is how we do it. Oh, let's say it again. This is our plan. This is our strategy. This is how we do it. Let's say it again. This is our plan. This is our strategy. This is how we do it. And the constant repetition of that leadership team in regards to those things is so critical. So then it becomes really important that the CEO ensures that within his or her team, they are completely aligned in regards to this. Other things are designing and improving systems. A really important thing is role modeling, behavior, and ensuring that the craft within the company and safety is really important, because it is interesting with a startup, you're constantly breaking things, but you can't allow anything to get chronic or anything to get so damaged that it's not fixable. So prioritizing and owning safety, especially as the business grows, becomes really important. I think this is something that doesn't get talked about enough. What exactly and how exactly is a leadership team measured, right? So a variety of different things. So I talked about communication of context. This should be measured through employee engagement results, attrition, qualitative information from attrition reports, and also just general employee engagement. Basically, the term is, do I know what's going on? As in, does each team member know what's going on? Strategy, are they delivering commercial results? And leadership teams should be held accountable in regards to within 6 months, yearly targets. Are we hitting commercial results? And the leadership team needs to own together the commercial performance that's expected. The other thing that's also really important is, did we do what we say we would do? And making sure that that comes through too. So team members should know, do I know where we're going and why? Designing improving systems, again, that should show through in employee engagement results. A team member should be able to simply answer a survey which goes 1 to 5, are you productive? Role modeling and behavior, calling out poor behavior. I think I'll touch on this a little bit later, but being compassionately ruthless in regards to this behavior is not okay, that behavior is okay. So a person should really come out saying, do I feel trusted because of how the leadership team is operating? And do I feel safe? Now, that doesn't mean that you need to have an amazingly autonomous environment, but a person should know what their constraints are and what levels of space they can work in. And finally, is the leadership team making sure that everybody else around them is growing in regards to your skill set? Now, that may be through other managers and other leaders, and maybe through other subject matter experts, but they need to own the fact that individuals need to be growing and learning. Again, this should be assessed through an employee engagement survey, etc. Now, I don't think this gets touched on enough. The group of people that hold the person that holds the leadership team accountable is the CEO, arguably, and should be. And then the group of people that holds the CEO accountable is the board, right? So selection of your board is really important because if they don't know what they're talking about, they don't have experience in product startup tech, they haven't seen scale ups and startups, then I'm sure that they may be wonderful business leaders in their own right, but they may not know the right questions to ask, and they may not know how to actually measure and nudge performance from the CEO and consequently the leadership team. The other thing that's really important to make sure the leadership team's operating really well is risk has to be aligned across founders, investors, and employees. Everybody's got to share the same vision and tolerance. It's been wonderful to see in the Australian startup ecosystem where the risk profile across the board has, I feel, really ramped up. And that's an example of the maturity of the startup ecosystem. And I'm excited to see that grow in New Zealand as well. A few points in regards to the fact that high performance culture should start from the top. In my opinion, CEOs that are problem obsessed, and what I mean by problem obsessed is there is a customer problem that I started off with that I want to solve and I desperately want to solve, and by solving it, it becomes a global solution, and it makes it such a big difference to the huge world, to the whole world. That's a really powerful battery which drives the organization. And I think it's really important that CEOs and leaders understand that and own that. It's a bit challenging when that's not the case. Because that battery then allows a CEO and an initial co-founding team and leadership team to change avatars over the life cycle. In my opinion, founder CEOs are incredibly important creatures. They go through so much and so much strain and stress, but they are malleable and they can change, and they will change if they're so obsessed about, man, I just need to solve this problem, I need to grow, etc. Hire the best right fit board. Hire the best right fit leadership team. Measure, get the measurements wrong, and then measure again when I'm talking about specifically starting off with the leadership team. Build a strong feedback culture, being able to, so companies like McKinsey and a lot of the top tech companies spend like 20-25% of their time giving feedback. And that makes life a lot easier. Do not compromise in regards to hiring, skill sets, etc. That doesn't mean you need to be a douchebag or be disrespectful to people. But from day dot, instill a culture where you're compassionately ruthless, right? And make that part of onboarding. Inclusivity is critical. I just want to call out one of the most exciting things I've seen over the last couple of years is young female software engineers, especially. Saying that they're not going to look at applying to a company unless they can see the diversity metrics being published by the company, and also like an inclusivity policy or guideline, etc. And from day dot, I think after an early stage of growth and once a business is running, leadership teams really have to prioritize inclusivity. It makes the biggest difference. And finally, the notion of thinking slow and acting fast. If you have a big people decision to make, write a document. Write a document before I hire someone, understand what the business problem is, understand what the skill set required is, write it down, and slow your decision-making down. So I suggested that the takeaways that I wanted to leave you with was, make sure you recognize the stage of the organization you're at, and therefore the skill set you require within your leadership team, and therefore what is the CEO's job. Think slow, act fast. So hire slowly. Measure the performance of your leadership team. You're not going to improve anything unless you don't measure it. And as I found out this morning doing my bicep curls, I'm still standing exactly where it was at 2 weeks ago. Make sure that your board has the right skills and experience. Critical. If they don't have the right skills and experience, and they can't assess the leadership team, and then consequently the team everywhere else. And make sure, hold on to the fact that high performance culture starts from the top. And if you are not able to hold each other accountable as a leadership team, then it's really hard to hold the rest of the business accountable. And after that, it's Q&A.
That was awesome, Mahesh. That was really insightful, and really some quite actionable frameworks that people can take away and hopefully implement in their organizations. I have had a couple of questions come through. If there are any more, then please do shout out. So first one here, growth priority initially is focused entirely on product innovation and product market fit. What role should marketing play in from problem to business and the bar mitzvah phase?
Yeah, it's a good point. So something that I have recently realized, having worked with more early stage CEOs, is you get to product market love. And I realized at that point, the biggest problem that CEOs seem to have is acquisition of customers and acquisition of talent. So you need to set up engines for talent acquisition and customer acquisition. And I think at that point, marketing really needs to kick in. And in my opinion, it becomes an all of company exercise in regards to, oh, wow, we need to set up a really strong acquisition engine and acquisition system. So I wouldn't call it, it's a marketing focus. I think the whole company has to come in and go, how are we going to get our customers? How are we going to organically get our customers? Is it through SEO? Do we have to set up a brand new product? Because once you nail that, then the product really starts to skyrocket. And there aren't that many subject matter experts on this in Australia and New Zealand, but we need to really foster that. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question. I think once product market love is nailed, the CEO and leadership's priority around, wow, we've got to really nail this acquisition engine is quite important.
Awesome, good answer there, Mahesh. A question I actually have for you, and I'm kind of intrigued to see what your answer is around this, is you mentioned obviously making it more of a priority, building out a talent or people function. Can you elaborate on that? And obviously it will depend on what problem the organization is solving, what stage they are in their growth, but would love if you could give some more context around that.
Yeah, so I really like seeing founders having had a track record and struggling through hiring, like actually having done it hands-on, grassroots. I mean, both Cliff at Canva and Al at Simply Wall Street, they did a lot of the initial hiring. So because they knew how important it was, right? So because you can spend $100,000, $150,000 on a new marketing program or on performance marketing or hiring an engineer, right? It's just capital spend that's going out. So you really need to understand what the economics of the talent market is, how you find it, what the assessment criteria is, when you should say yes, when you shouldn't say yes, you should be reading blogs, etc. And once as a leader or co-founding team does that, then they go, oh my goodness, this is so much work. I need to bring on board someone to do this even better than me, that can focus on this. It is so expensive. Like you read so many, like Stripe, Airbnb, etc. Like they were so slow in hiring their first few people because they did not want to get it wrong. So then very quickly early on, bringing on board that talent acquisition person and then also fleshing out that larger people operations function becomes really critical. If I'm not wrong, in Silicon Valley, I think like the 6th or 7th person they hire in a team is like a really data-oriented, strong talent acquisition professional.
Awesome, cool. Another question here. How do you balance getting top talent with not being able to pay a lot and when you don't have a good brand to attract them?
Yeah. I'm going to the Canva story again. If you do some research, you'll find how Canva got its first senior engineer from Google. It's a wonderful story. I think at the end of the day, a CEO and a co-founding team has to really understand their metrics and has to really understand the problem they're solving. I've always said, and I mentioned it, I didn't say it actually, the single most important thing I believe that a leadership team and a company needs to create to make sure that you have an awesome working environment is that you have to feel like you're winning, There has to be real wins. You've got to be hitting targets. You've got to be going through the roof. In my opinion, top talent all across the board, engineers, product managers, growth people, that really good people are looking for that first new, exciting early stage startup that they can be a part of. So nail your problem, get the metrics right, get the story right, and then send out 100 emails to top talent who you think they are. 20% of that top talent will come back. Send a second and third email to 80% of the people who haven't come back. Make sure that early pitch and the metrics, all of that is written down in 2 documents. My bet is in about a month and a half, you'll have the hire you're looking for.
Awesome, great. There's plenty of questions flowing in now, and we've only got a few minutes left. So let me see if we can get a couple more in. You mentioned the importance of communication of context. Repetition is key here. What different ways should a leadership team communicate their context? How does a team measure if their context is getting through?
Yeah, good question. So ritual setting, and this is like a people operations function. I like to see split up into talent acquisition, team happiness, and vibe. And vibe is really making sure that the internal sort of office systems and structures are up and running. So what are the company rituals, etc. So having weekly and very constant periodic, hey, every Monday we're going to get together, every Wednesday we're going to get together, and this is everything that's happening in the company. And every Friday we have like a hands down session of how the week went. Weekly newsletters. And also, so you establish those communication channels and they last for a very long time. The other thing that's important is starting management teams. So one of the most, funnily enough, one of the most innovative things you can do is once you've got like 2 or 3 managers, starting a manager Slack group. Because then you are making sure their job is to make sure that the context you have provided them and the detail you have provided them, they are then providing to other people. That is by far and beyond their job. And how you know if it's working is through employee engagement surveys.
Awesome. Good. Another question here. You talked about the problem solver CEO. What are your thoughts on the problem solver who's advocating to solve isolated customer problems that do not benefit the core product and are resellable?
Okay, so that sounds like your everyday normal challenge where a product manager, an engineer, a senior engineer has with a CEO that may be getting a little bit too involved. Trust me, in my experience, a CEO that gets a little bit too involved is not a bad thing. What's really important is that a leadership team and a CEO is consistent and clear about where they want to go and not chopping and changing. You can't afford to get product release and product growth wrong, mainly because if it's not aligned, the CEO and leadership team will unconsciously like just change things. So I mean, a leadership team is going to get involved. The CEO is going to get involved. So until you have really strong product market fit and you're growing gangbusters and you have middle managers, it's very unlikely you're going to keep a CEO or a leadership team away from the product. And arguably you shouldn't.
Cool. I've got one final question for you, Mahesh. You talk about this concept of thinking slow and acting fast. And I'd like you to elaborate on that a little bit more in relation to hiring, because obviously when we're competing for top talent that's sought after in this market every day, how do you balance taking your time, but then not losing out to great people in the market and acting fast?
Yeah, so thanks, Neil. It's an absolutely valid question. It is so much slower and so much costly if you get a hire wrong, especially early on. So in the top 50 people, so there's a story of how Brian Chesky, like the top 50, top 40 people in first 50 people in Airbnb absolutely felt like they were all like founders and they just hired really slowly. Yes, there is tension to grow. the thing is, if you go slow and you're extremely precise about your early hiring, and you will still get things wrong, but if you have that system and discipline, things start to accelerate later on, right? So if you make sure your first 20 to 30 people, you have a really good talent acquisition person and a team, really good system, you are celebrating hiring. At all the startups I've worked at, we've like, when we've made a hire, we get up and clap and celebrate it and cheer it, etc. Because there's one more cult member who's joined, and we're going to help to achieve the mission. It goes a long way. So just do it slowly and assiduously. And after 50 people or so, it starts to accelerate a lot more. Do not compromise on this.
Awesome. Great. Well, like, I think unfortunately that's all we have time for. I think we could talk about this stuff all day, every day, Mahesh. So on behalf of Blackbird, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. And I really hope you enjoyed hearing some of that amazing advice. Next week, we'll have another edition of Giants. So it'll actually be increasing your SaaS trial conversions. So quite a different, more technical topic. Without developer involvement. So that will be with Funnel Ventures CEO Audrey Melnick. And just a quick reminder, if you're an aspiring or early stage founder seeking content and community, please look at joining our new Giants platform to get one-to-one mentoring, connect with fellow founders, and dive into our best resources all in one place. You can sign up through our website. So thanks again, everyone. Enjoy your mornings and have a great week. Thanks, Mahesh.
Thank you. Thanks, Nell.
See ya.